Hello, and welcome to another video. This video is about Unit 3, Lesson 1, Multiple Measurements. What are the units for measuring things? So, there are three different things that we can measure about something. We can measure its length, which is the distance from one end to another. So imagine I have a box here. Box. Okay. From one end to the other is its length. It also has another length from the top to the bottom and another length from front to back. And it could have diagonal lengths, all sorts of lengths. But just as long as it's a distance from one piece to another piece, that is a length. Volume, how much space is inside. So imagine I open this box and I fill it full of ping pong balls. If it has a lot of volume, it can fit a lot of ping pong balls. If it has very little volume, it can fit only a few ping pong balls. Volume, how much space is inside. Mass, how heavy something is. If I fill up this box with ping pong balls, it would be a certain amount of weight. If I filled it up with lead balls, it would have more weight. So, how heavy something is called its mass. That's not technically the correct thing. Mass is independent of gravity. Weight is dependent on gravity. But we'll just use that definition for right now. The length units. Well, we have two different measuring systems that dominate the world. One is called the International System, sometimes referred to as the metric system, and the other is the United States Customary Units, sometimes called the Imperial System. So we're going to separate them. The length units in the Imperial United States Customary Units, the shortest one is an inch. Longer than that is a foot. Longer than that is a yard. Longer than that is a mile. Anything other than those measurements are obscure, things like furlongs, legions, all sorts of things like that are measurements of length, but they are not customarily used. These are the ones that are customarily used. In the international system, the standard is a meter. Smaller than a meter is a decimeter. Smaller than a decimeter is a centimeter. Smaller than a centimeter is a millimeter. Smaller than that, you get into nanometers, micrometers, 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 etc., etc. But again, angstroms, these are not units that are commonly used. Larger than a meter is a decameter. Larger than a decameter is a heptameter. And larger than a heptameter is a kilometer. Now, technically, you mostly don't hear of decimeters, decameters, and heptameters. You mostly hear about meters, kilometers, centimeters, and millimeters. The others exist, and they're easy to use, but they are not common. So now we'll talk about the units for volume. In the United States Customary Units, the imperial system, the smallest measurement of volume is an ounce. And then the next one higher is a cup, and then a pint, and then a quart, and then a gallon. In the international system, in the metric system, the basic unit is a liter, and there are deciliters, centiliters, and milliliters. Again, we generally don't use centiliters, although I have seen them used in European things. I bought a 20 centiliter Diet Coke in France. And then higher than a liter is a decaliter, heptaliter, and a kiloliter. Any of those are not commonly used. Really, you only hear about liters and milliliters. The rest are just less commonly used. The mass units in the U.S. customary units are ounces and pounds, and then tons. In the metric system, generally we have this grams, smaller than grams again, decigrams, centigrams, and then milligrams. We generally don't see centigrams and decigrams. Milligrams, really the places that you see milligrams are like dosages or amounts of vitamins. Those are where you see milligrams, like you might take 500 milligrams of Tylenol, for example. Larger than grams are again decagrams, heptagrams, and kilograms. We really don't see decagrams and heptagrams. Mostly you see grams, milligrams, for, as I said, on the sides of pills or on the sides of cereal boxes, and kilograms. Larger than that is tons, and to distinguish it from the old tons, it's spelled T-O-N-N-E-S, or long tons, because it's a bit more. But actually a ton and a ton, they're almost the same amount. All right, so going back, let's review a bit, and let's talk about when you would use each type of measurement. Well, an inch is not very long. It actually is, if you're viewing this on an iPad, you'll see it's about that long. Some of the things that you might measure in inches, you might measure the length of a pencil. Might be an inch long. A foot, as you know, is 12 inches. We're getting into the units later on. And something that is commonly measured in feet would be the length of a table, or the height of a person is usually in feet and inches. Like I am 5 feet tall and 6 inches, so 5 foot 6 inches. Yards are, as you probably know, 3 feet. And something you might measure in yards is the length of a room. And miles you might measure it as the distance between towns might be measured. So you could say that the distance between Dunellen and New Brunswick is about 8 miles. For the international system, something that is a meter long, it's probably a desk, a student desk. Or the width of a door might be a meter. A kilometer, again, would be the distance between towns. A kilometer is only 0.65 miles. So it's more than a half, but it's not quite, a little bit more than a half of a mile long. So miles are longer than kilometers. A centimeter, that would be like the width of a finger. Might be about 1 centimeter long, wide. And a millimeter is very thin, so like the thickness of a coin. Thickness of a coin would be about a millimeter, or maybe 2 millimeters if it's a very thick coin. Volume units, something measured in ounces, well, it would just be like an ingredient, a liquid ingredient. Oh, and by the way, since ounces is also a mass unit, we often make these as fluid ounces, just to distinguish the two of them. But if it's clear that you're dealing with a liquid volume, then you just say ounces. And it's interesting that water is the converter. 1 fluid ounce weighs 1 ounce of water. Other liquids weigh different amounts. Oil is lighter, mercury is heavier, different fluids weigh different amounts. So fluid ounce, something that might be 1 fluid ounce is just a, oh, I don't want to use that reference. How about the amount of water in a small puddle? A cup, it's the milk carton in the cafeteria is generally 8 ounces, which is a cup. A pint is 2 of those, so a pint would be a large glass. Might have a pint in it. A quart is the smaller measurement, like a quart of milk. And then a gallon would be a larger amount of milk, a jug of milk. It's interesting that 3 of the measurements I've used are milk. We drink a lot of milk. It's a very common liquid that we have in our lives. So liters are half a bottle of soda. Generally, bottles of soda are 2 liters, so half of that would be a 1 liter. You can sometimes see 1 liter bottles, especially in like the Quick Check. You'll see 1 liter bottles. Milliliters are very small. It's actually if you had a cube that was 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, that is a cubic centimeter, and that's equal to 1 milliliter. So that's very small. That might be a drop of water. That would be a milliliter. If you get a drink of water, that would be measured in like 500 milliliters. That would be about a drink of water. The mass units, well, something that weighs an ounce, just a small amount, would be something like possibly a small mouse might weigh an ounce. A pound, you have a small kitten, might weigh 1 pound. And a ton, that would be like a car, would weigh a ton. Milligrams, as we said, that would be like dosages or vitamins. It's a very small amount. Grams, well, 1 gram is always typically maybe a small paper clip weighs 1 gram. So you know how, or a raisin, 1 raisin is often 1 gram. So that's very light, as you can imagine. It takes a bunch of grams to measure most things. A kilogram, that's actually 2.2. A kilogram is 2.2 pounds. So you can see that it's twice as heavy. And a kilogram is something that's measured in a kilogram might be, let's see. Well, you might have a barbell for lifting weights that's 1 kilogram. You might have a stack of books that might be measured in a kilogram. A ton is actually 1,000,000 grams. So it's actually 1,000 kilograms. So something that might be that heavy would be, again, a car. Since a ton and a ton are almost the same amount. They're not quite, but they're almost the same amount. All right, so now let's talk about how to convert between them. What are some of the equalities? Well, 1 foot is 12 inches. 1 yard is 3 feet. 1 mile is, I forget now. I know that it's 5,280 feet. And then I'll use my calculator. 5,280 divided by 3 is 1,760 yards. A meter is 1 meter. A centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. And then a millimeter is 1/1000th of a meter. And then a kilometer is 1,000 meters. And as I said before, 1 mile is 0.65 miles is 1 kilometer. For volume, there are 8 ounces in a cup, 2 cups in a pint, 2 pints in a quart, and then sort of similar to its name, 4 quarts in 1 gallon. I learned this from an elementary school teacher. You put a big G for gallons, and inside you put 4 quarts. Each one of those you split into 2 pints. Inside of those, you split it into 2 cups, and each of those is 8 ounces. I don't know if it's helpful to you. I found it to be helpful when I learned it. So, a liter is, actually you can get a liter by doing 10 by 10 by 10, 10 centimeters, 10 centimeters, 10 centimeters, because 1 milliliter is 1/1000th of a liter. And so 10 times 10 is 1,000, and so 1,000 of those would fit into 1 liter. Imagine a box that's about as wide as your hand and about as tall as your hand and about as long as your hand. That's about the size of a liter. And this is how you convert between them. A liter is 1,000 milliliters. Okay, for mass units, 16 ounces makes 1 pound, and 2,000 pounds makes 1 ton. Now remember how I said that a kilogram is 2.2 pounds? Well, a metric ton, or long ton, is 1,000 kilograms, and if each kilogram is 2.2 pounds, that's times 2.2, and you get 2,200 pounds. So you see how they're actually very similar amounts. 2,000 pounds, 2,200 pounds, very similar amounts. So 1,000 kilometers is 1 ton. 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 grams, and a milligram is 1/1000th of a gram. Remember how a gram is 1 raisin? Imagine cutting that raisin into 1,000 teeny tiny pieces. You'd only get like raisin dust. Each of those raisin dusts would be 1 milligram. That's why it's really only measured in medicines and vitamins and things like that. So if you see, if there's 1,000 milligrams is 1 gram, and you see that one pill, like maybe an aspirin pill, is 500 milligrams, well, that's just half of a gram. 500 milligrams would be half of 1,000, and so that's half of a gram. And those are the basic units and some of the things they measure and how they relate to each other. I hope this was helpful. Make sure that you ask your teacher if you have any questions.